When the phrase favorite game comes to mind, I'd most likely say Terraria, Halo, or Plants vs. Zombies. However, the one time I have truly felt utterly consumed and absorbed into a game was Destiny 2. The world was alive, the gameplay exciting, and the art direction was incredible. The first year of Destiny seemed like a fever dream, and in this expansive world I found one of my all-time favorite fantasy weapons, the RiskRunner. Honestly, Destiny and Halo were a huge factor when guiding me to weapon design. So in order to honor that memory, I'd like to remake my own concept weapon, heavily inspired by Destiny 2's RiskRunner SMG. Okay, so before I start drawing, I'm just going to analyze the original design a little bit. To make it clear, these are not my images, these belong to Bungie or Destiny 2. Let's just start with the basic shape language. I'm seeing a lot of triangle shapes, a lot of repetition. We've got these three, battery packs. We've got three major points on the grip. We have the three battle prongs or conductive metal leads. And then yeah, just the way the handle and all these spaces are. Just getting a very angular, triangular look. As for its overall gun shape, all I can really think of when I see this gun is an Uzi. So it's a pretty simple SMG shape. For the negatives, I'm not a huge fan when energy weapons have both magazines and battery packs. I understand for gameplay perspectives and because Destiny uses different types of ammo. I think it's light ammo for SMGs. So it makes sense from a gameplay perspective to have a magazine, but from from an art direction, it seems a bit strange. Either use the battery packs and you can either replace the packs or have a cooldown method or an overheating, or just have a magazine and not have it be an energy weapon. But that's nitpicking. Next thing I see is, to be honest, and I see this a lot, I do feel the in-game model loses a little bit of charm from the concept. The color itself is a bit more serious, it's a bit more realistic. Sure, the turquoise is iconic and does look great, but after studying the concept, I think I definitely prefer the more serious, I'd say, shark blue. As for its overall design, not much has changed, but look how aggressive the concept is. It's very angular. It's as if all this gun wants to do is attack. It has no defense, it is just purely for attack, speed and aggression. Even though they've only really changed, I'd say probably the center one a bit, just adding this flat bit, it does make it look a little bit more tame, a bit more, I would say, domesticated. They've also, I would say, shortened the distance between the two grips. They've changed where the finger guard is. It's subtle changes, but I would say it's almost like we're viewing a more kiddie version of the weapon. As for aspects that I really like, I have to just say everything about this scope, fantastic. Most scopes, they play it safe and they use what real traditional scopes would use, which is a little dial, either with a little bit of grip to change the settings, or it's a cap that you pop off and there'll be a little bit of a screw or an Allen key port to change your settings. But this one uses a slider, similar to that you'd find on like video cameras, or I think the Nikon camera lenses. They are very similar ones for changing your manual focus to your automatic focus. So yeah, absolutely love that. As for color, I mean, you can't ever go wrong with blue and yellow and white, so 10 out of 10. The only real, I'd say, interesting or challenging bit is this. Now, I asked a few people what they thought this was. Whenever I've seen it, I've kind of just thought of, I would say, like, you get this type of stuff, it's non-conductive gel. They use it for waterproofing electronics, or you get some that's for cooling electronics, and that's just what I always thought this was. Other people see it as like plastic shielding. Some sort has water being contained by gravity as a cooling device. All of these are pretty interesting things, so it's just interesting to see when we all look at the same shape or the same structure, but we get completely different ideas. Now, it's hard to not sound arrogant when you're judging or dissecting other people's artworks. Let me make this perfectly clear. Both the people that designed the concept and the in-game models are fantastic artists, and I hope one day I can be as good as them. So, with that in mind, I just want to do the best with respect and admiration in mind to create my own interpretation of the RiskRunner. The goal isn't to create an identical gun. That's technically challenging, yes, but creativity, it's not really using any, and that's the aspect I love the most. So at the end of the day, I want this gun to look like it's from the same factory, planet, designer. They must look similar, related, but they must nowhere near look identical. They must be completely different guns at the end of the day. So let me get straight into the design. So after a while, I've got a couple concept sketches. Now I think anyone familiar with weapons can clearly see I use the Krita Vector as the base. I just thought if we're using an awesome in-game weapon, we might as well use the coolest real-life weapon as well. I've tried to stick to the repetition with a lot of these items. I've removed the magazine and I've just transferred the battery packs all the way to the front. These patches over here, I'm thinking these are most likely going to be some sort of capacitors. These, I want some electromagnetic coils, and then the center bit I'm going to keep the same as the original, or at least very similar. So this was the color sketch, and then I also did 2 different variations of color just for fun. I'll probably still use the original RiskRunner variants. The weird thing I always find with these concept sketches is the better my artistic skills get, the worse my concept sketches are. I mean, I'll show a couple of my older ones and some of my more recent ones, and it's like a de-evolution of beauty. I think because at the end of the day, a concept sketch is a concept sketch. It's supposed to be quick, it's supposed to be raw. But to break it down, this is going to be that gel compartment. These are going to be capacitors, electromagnetics. These are probably going to be some lithium cells. This will be a cooling unit. These will be heat pipes, and then these will most likely be the copper pipes on heat sinks. They've got a vapor in them, so I'd call them vapor pipes with just a normal heat sink above it. When thinking electricity, you're mainly just thinking, how does it get powered? And then electricity, especially high voltage electricity, it is incredibly hot, so it needs to have cooling. I drew this as wood. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll probably change it later. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. The one aspect I didn't really like, and I only noticed this after flipping it a few times, and that was that this long base, especially if it's going to be filled with capacitors and wires, is going to be so heavy. If the pivot point of the gun is here, this is, even with this extra handle, this thing is going to be horrible to carry. It is going to be so front heavy, so backlight. So instead of doing that, I thought maybe I would just compact it. I've just done a shortcut here where I've just cropped and cut it, a pretty sloppy job. But overall, putting all the capacitors into the center, I'd say the center chassis, it makes for a much more well-balanced gun, because now, if this is where most of the weight of the gun is, and the 2 pivot points where you're holding the gun are here and here, it makes for a much more balanced weapon. These things are quite hard to, I'd say, tell in the concept sketch stage. If I'd taken this to 3D, I would have instantly seen that the barrel was too heavy, too big. So it wouldn't have mattered too much back in 3D. It would have been quite a quick fix, but I'm glad that I spotted it here. No longer have to change it later on. The final model. I have kept quite a lot of the repetition, and I've tried to evenly spread high detailed areas with low detail areas. As for the model itself, it's all quite simple geometry, just some simple mesh. The only parts that are slightly complicated are maybe the handles, but even that, when your geometry is clean, using subsurface division, it's really easy to come up with these complex shapes. As for details, a lot of these have hidden panels behind them. So down here, using the inspiration from EVs, these are lithium cells just connected up for the battery packs. And then up here are capacitors with electric coils and some heat pipes. For the main barrel, I've used an electric magnet. So just like an electric motor, it's just tons of copper wrapped over anything magnetic like iron or something. For that, subsurface division as well, and then just a heatsink underneath it. For the core of the gun, also a heatsink and a vapor pipe. There are some nice hidden details on this gun. So underneath the handle, there is a cooling unit. Got the trigger. And in the scope, I was really inspired with how the RiskRunner did its scope, so I kept this one very close to the original. I did make it a little bit more geometric, and then added a stand so it could be clipped on and moved around. But I kept the buttons very similar, and the frame as well. I added a second display. That's just going to make it so I feel like with these futuristic guns, you want to be able to see like what your temperature is, what your ammo count is, or in this case, what your voltage is, what your battery life is, those kind of things. For the stock, I added just I would call this a chin rest. And then here I've added some shocks like you'd see on a bicycle or a motorcycle to absorb the thing. The extra mag. From this perspective, I'm really liking how the gun's looking. Just gonna add everything again. I mean, I'm just in love with its top view. I feel like it almost looks like a creature, like a whale or something. But, I mean, the most important view is probably going to be this first-person view. And, I mean, that looks fantastic as well. This gun's pretty basic as far as guns go. I mean, yeah, it is complex for a beginner, but it's a lot of simple stuff done over and over and over again. That's all it is. It's just practice and repetition. The one tip I would say is when you have lots of repeating items, instead of just using arrays, you can use the alt duplicate. So if I just remove all these glass panels and I go and I edit some of this mesh. So let's just grab one of the vertex. You see how all of them are changing? So to do that, it's pretty simple. You just go add a cube. And then instead of shift duplicating it, you hit Alt D. Alt D, you can scale them. Whoopsie. Scale them, you can rotate them. But then when you go and edit the original, or actually anyone for that matter, they're all going to edit at the same time. So it just makes it really useful when you want to have lots of items, but you don't have to change them. Or with an array, sometimes, you know, if you want to have complex movements or rotations, it's quite difficult to get that with array. Things like extruding and stuff, it's going to copy. So I would say that is probably the tool I used most for this project, just because there are so many repeating items. I mean, there's all these capacitors, more capacitors in there, all the cells in that mag, this mag, lots of pipes, lots of vents. There's just repeating elements all over this gun. So without arrays or the old duplication, this gun would take a lot longer than it did. I find textureless renders with glass insanely satisfying. Now I will be painting and texturing this model, however I need a break from 3D, and the last thing I want to do is rush the shading and ruin a potential artwork. Pushing ahead isn't always the best. Patience and knowing when you're at your limit are crucial to creating anything beautiful. So thanks for watching.